You're listening to the Bears Barroom Radio Network, and the following program is suitable for all audiences.
Paxton for three! Yeah! Yeah!
In 1993, when Chicago Bulls guard John Paxson sunk the series-winning shot in Game 6 of the NBA Finals, Mark Schanowski was there reporting. In 1988, when Michael Jordan beat Dominique Wilkins in what is considered the greatest, most controversial slam dunk duel of all time, David Schuster was there reporting.
What kind of expectations do you set for yourself individually going into year 3?
In 2010, when Derrick Rose said,
"Why can't I be the MVP of the league? Why can't I be the best player in the league? I don't see why. Why can't I do that?"
It was Mark Schanowski who asked the question.
It is my distinct honor to present the 2010-2011 NBA Most Valuable Player Award to Derrick Rose of the Chicago Bulls.
In 2011, when Rose accepted the Most Valuable Player award to become the youngest MVP in the history of the league, David Schuster was there reporting. Schanowski, Schuster, two of Chicago's most accomplished NBA reporters. This is Sharpshooters.
Welcome into the latest edition of Sharpshooters. I'm David Schuster, and he, of course, is Mr. Mark Schanowski. And Mark, kudos to the NBA because they are getting to the finish line. A lot of people were apprehensive about this whole bubble thing, but you know what? It has worked, and it has worked well.
Yeah, I give a lot of credit to Adam Silver. I mean, throughout the process when the NBA was shut down, he was always saying that we're not going to come back, we're not going to rush. We want to make sure that we talk to the experts in science and try to figure out the safest way to get our players back. They came up with a plan that has worked almost to perfection.
Absolutely. Now, we'll be getting to our special guest a little bit later on in this podcast. That's Mr. Chuck Swirsky, who I've had the pleasure of working with over the years, and you can follow him on Twitter at CTS Bulls. And also, we'll be certainly going down everything in regards to the Bulls. We'll hear from Billy Donovan. We'll hear from Arturas Karnisovas. But right now, let's start in the bubble, and the NBA Finals are now set. We are recording this on Monday. Last night, Miami did the finishing touches. Actually, it was what, in the afternoon? Because I actually forgot about the game because I was dealing with the Bears. Okay, I was dealing with the Bears so much yesterday that I almost forgot about basketball until the last minute. But kudos to the Miami Heat. They have played extremely, and I do mean extremely well, in this whole entire postseason, and you know what? They were the better team against the Boston Celtics.
What a way to close out the series, too. Boston rallied in the second half as they had done in Game 5 and took a 96-90 lead, and you're thinking, all right, we'll get a Game 7 on Wednesday, because we had both thought that series was likely to go 7 games. And then all of a sudden, Miami put it into another gear, and they just blew them out of the gym. They outscored them by 18 over the final 9 minutes, and it turned out to be a blowout at the end.
You know, and actually they did that in all their wins. They had stretches where they went on these extended runs, and their defense, obviously, as most teams do, defense leads to offense, a lot of fast break baskets, and you got to hand it to Jimmy Butler. I mean, we could talk about Jimmy Butler until the cows come home, but Jimmy Butler is now in the NBA Finals, and for all those Jimmy Butler backers, including Jimmy himself, he's probably his biggest backer. I guess right now he can perch a little bit and just say, hey, I proved my point.
And social media is always having a lot of fun, saying 2 of the 3 alphas are now in the NBA Finals with Rondo and Jimmy. Of course, Dwayne Wade is an interested spectator because his heart and soul belongs with the Miami Heat organization, and LeBron is probably his best friend in basketball. So now he's going to have to be torn a little bit. I'm sure he'll be pulling for the Heat, but part of him is going to feel for LeBron with his 3-6 record in the finals. The Lakers are a prohibitive favorite. I would guess that they would win that series in 6 games max. But because Miami has a good defensive mentality, they've got multiple guys to throw at LeBron, and Bam Adebayo did his best Anthony Davis impersonation yesterday. He looked like AD, putting the ball on the ground. He had 5 assists. I think he was 32 points, 14 rebounds. His development has been astonishing, and I tweeted last night that you'd hope that maybe Wendell Carter, another undersized 6'9 center, could go along that track. Now, Wendell's not as athletic as Bam Adebayo is, but he was totally phased out of that offensive system. I think that there's a lot of growth potential for Wendell Carter. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Bam Adebayo, who made the Eastern Conference All-Star team this last year. But I think that he can emerge as a guy that is really going to surprise people in coming years.
The thing about Bam Adebayo is he plays bigger than his height.
Right.
He what is he? He's technically 6'9".
Yeah.
He plays like he's 6'11", 7 feet. He's a tremendous force under the basket, both offensively and defensively. And his offensive game is certainly, expanded over the last year or two. And, Jimmy Butler just brags about this guy all the time.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And really the culture down in Miami is what has gotten them to this point. You can't take that away from them. Whether it's Pat Riley, whether it's Spoelstra, whether it's Jimmy Butler, whether it's the whole combination, they are playing as a cohesive team. That being said, Lakers in 5.
Well, and you have to give a lot of credit to the Miami Heat in terms of their player development system. I think that Eric Spoelstra and his staff do a remarkable job with guys that a lot of teams didn't want. Remember, they signed Kendrick Nunn out of the G League at the end of last season, and everybody's like, well, why would you make that move at the end of the year? Well, they saw something in him they thought that he could develop. He had a phenomenal year for him, got hurt late in the season, and he's fallen completely out of the rotation now. Kendrick Nunn's not even playing, but he's a player that they will use in the future. Duncan Robinson, an undrafted player, has become one of the best three-point shooters in the game. And you look at the end of the lottery, it seems like that's been a vast wasteland over the years. Everybody gets excited about the first 10 picks, and for whatever reason, 11 to 14 doesn't generally seem to work out that well. But they got both Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero in the back end of the lottery and have developed them into outstanding players. It'll be interesting to see what Hero becomes. This is his rookie season. He can shoot it. He can shoot off the dribble. He's more athletic than you might expect. And Adebayo has been a revelation. I just give so much credit to that whole culture led by Pat Riley.
Hero in that one game was fantastic.
Yeah, 37
points, and he was just automatic from outside. Help me out, because I don't remember. How heralded was he when he went to Kentucky, coming out of high school and going there? How heralded was he?
Well, he actually played at a high school that I'm very familiar with. I grew up in Milwaukee. He played at a high school, Whitnall High School, which is just outside on the south side of Milwaukee, and wasn't that heralded of a player. He originally committed to go to the University of Wisconsin, and then he decommitted there. And obviously John Calipari saw something that he could fit, because we've talked about it in the past. At Kentucky, the guys usually only stay a year or two, and they've got 10 McDonald's All-Americans, so he usually plays 9, 10 guys. Generally, guys don't have big numbers there. I mean, you look at Jamal Murray when he was there. He didn't have big counting stats, because they spread the wealth, they spread the minutes kind of evenly, and he's willing to play two separate units. So Hero came in. He didn't start the whole season. He started some games. He didn't really knock your socks off like, wow, this guy's going to be a great NBA player. And you always wondered if maybe he was a little bit undersized or if he was athletic enough. And then he gets to the league, and not only is he making threes, but he's beating guys off the dribble. And Jimmy Butler has praised him for his work ethic. Talking about the fact that they get up early and they go to the gym, and he's just like Jimmy. He's a gym rat like Jimmy. And Butler took him under his wing, and he's really developed a lot faster than I think any NBA scout would have envisioned.
All right, now the kid, and I underlined the word kid because he's not even 21 years old just yet. So obviously his ceiling, is still way in front of him or above him at this point. So again, kudos to the Miami Heat. They took apart the Celtics in certain aspects of each game that they won, and that's why they deserve to be in the finals.
You scared me for a minute. I thought you were going to go Michael Jordan and say the ceiling is the roof. then we would have had a problem.
Only when I drink would I say something like that, which might be a little bit right after this podcast. No, again, kudos to the Miami Heat, and kudos to the whole organization. And anytime I see Pat Riley, he's an icon. I mean, he's just an icon.
Well, even Spoelstra last night, and when they were giving him the trophy, I chuckled. He goes, he credited all the organization, the owner, everything. He goes, I'm the Godfather. So even Spoelstra's calling him the Godfather, because when you think about what he has done going from Los Angeles to the Knicks to the Miami, he's had an unparalleled career when you think about all the things he's done, all the different places he's been. He was a player that won a championship with the Lakers back in 1972, played at Kentucky under Adolph Rupp. I mean, his basketball odyssey is unbelievable.
Yeah. All right. Now, speaking of the Lakers, they are obviously the other team in the finals. We're going to talk more about LeBron and his odyssey of NBA finals. He is 3-6. Mm-hmm. He's got a chance to go to 4-6. He'll never catch Michael. Sorry, not going to catch Michael. And he got 6 losses in the finals anyway. But I said over a bunch of these podcasts recently that the Lakers had 2 of the best 5 players in the world.
Right.
it's actually two of the three best players in the world.
When you consider Durant is out.
Yeah,
so
Durant is out.
Kind
So
of put him aside for now.
Yeah. Giannis is the other one.
Sure.
I mean, Anthony Davis. I mean, it's hard for me to be impressed by Anthony Davis because he's so damn good, but he actually further impressed me in some of these games. I mean, that turnaround, well, it wasn't so much a turnaround, but the three-pointer that he won one of the games with at the buzzer was just adding to his lore, if you will. He can do so many things. And LeBron, of course. I mean, LeBron is just a freak of nature. I don't know what else to call him at this point. In the final game, when they knocked off Denver in the fifth game, 38 points, 16 rebounds, 10 assists. I mean, that is a monster triple-double.
He is unbelievable, and when you look at Jordan won his last championship when he was 35, LeBron is 35 now, and you look at the parallels, LeBron is more athletic at 35 than Jordan was.
Absolutely.
Jordan used his mind and just was able to really beat players in a variety of ways. He
His
had
will.
The turnaround jumper. He didn't dunk the ball very much when he was 35.
He did not.
But now LeBron is so athletic, he can still do the chase down block. When he needs to, he can really exert himself defensively. They put him on Jamal Murray late in Game 5. He said, I'll take him. We're going to close this thing out right now. They didn't want to play any extra games because in Game 4, Anthony Davis had that ugly-looking ankle turn. You know, you and I have played basketball all our lives, and when you see that, you just cringe because you remember the pain and how much that hurts. And look, he went down in a heap, and you're wondering, wow, if he's going to be out for an extended period, there are chances for a championship would disappear. But going back to Davis, I give him all the credit in the world. He didn't, he just, like LeBron, the instant healing powers, like a Wolverine or something. He was able to get back out there and finish that game, came back and had a really good game in Game 5. So I give a lot of credit to AD for showing his physical toughness. And LeBron, he is one of the best of all time, and it's going to be really tough for the Heat, even though they have Jimmy and they have an older Andre Iguodala and Jay Crowder. They can run different guys at him, maybe try to wear him down a little bit, but this guy's unbelievable. He doesn't wear down.
He just figures out a way to overpower you, to be honest with you, in so many different aspects. LeBron does. I don't want to talk more about LeBron in just a second, but I didn't think I'd ever give praise to the following player that I'm about to give praise to, but I got to admit he has earned my praise not only in this playoffs, but actually all year. Dwight Howard has actually played very well for the Lakers. He knows that this is his last chance and his best chance for winning a championship, even though he had other opportunities with the Lakers in the past. And I've recited that story about how Kobe Bryant just couldn't stand him, in the first go around when he was a Laker. But here he is. He is playing defense. He's rebounding. I mean, he can score if he needs to score. I got to give some praise to the guy, and I never thought I would do so.
It's really all about role acceptance with Howard. I mean, he was on the program where you're on a different team every year because no one could stand playing with him, from teammates to coaching staff to front office. They just felt like he was a player who groused about his touches, didn't feel like he was getting enough opportunities on offense, wasn't getting the credit that he deserved within the system. And he bounced around from Atlanta to Washington to Charlotte and finally finds a home back with the Lakers. And it really is about accepting the fact that he's older now. He's not going to be a prolific low post scorer. He's not going to get 10, 12 touches with his back to the basket where he can go to work. He's got to get his baskets off the offensive glass. He's got to hustle. He's got to play defense. He's got to switch out on smaller players. And he's accepted his role. It took him a long time, longer than most, but he did. And now he's got a good chance to pick up a championship ring because of it.
All right, I want to go back to LeBron for just a second. On my totem pole of the greatest players ever, he's either number 2 or number 3. Michael is always going to be number 1, and I'm jaded in saying so because I saw every game of his career up close and personal. LeBron, I agree with you, Mark. I mean, at this stage of both their careers, the fact that he is still playing at the same level as he did early in his career, doing the exact same things, LeBron is just a freak of nature, and maybe he's got that over Michael. The only other person I put in the top 3 equation would be Kareem for obvious reasons. But the one knock that I will always give against LeBron is that he's 3-6 in finals, and he's got a chance and probably will win his 4th one very shortly. is that the fact that he moved around to get those championships. Obviously, he went down to Miami. He teamed up with Bosch and Wade to win 2 down there. He basically called the shots of getting Anthony Davis to come to the Lakers, the second best or third best player in the world, to play along with him. So that's always going to be a knock against him, and always going to be, at least for me, the reason he will never supplant Michael Jordan as number 1.
And that's one of the big storylines going into this finals. Of course, LeBron facing one of his old teams, the Miami Heat, and Pat Riley was very bitter when LeBron left to go back to Cleveland, saying now we won't have any more of the smiling faces in the room with agendas. Referring to LeBron always looking for the best way to stack the deck in his favor. Miami showed some signs of weakness later on with Chris Bosh's health issues and some of their support players not living up to expectations. He looked around and saw his buddy, Dwayne Wade, maybe slowing down just a little bit at that point, and he thought, I'm still in my prime. I'm going to go somewhere else and try to win. And, you think about the fact that going back to that era of free agency, remember LeBron and Wade were at a camp somewhere and went by private plane, and he told Wade, I'm leaving, I'm going back to Cleveland, and then Wade had to get on the same plane and go back to Miami with him. I mean, Wade... Bulls fans are kind of split on Wade, and Chicago basketball fans. I shouldn't say Bulls fans, because his 1 year was just kind of one of those things. He wanted to wear the uniform. He wasn't really invested in it. But Wade is kind of one of those figures that really sparks a lot of controversy, and people are split on him. But he was Miami Heat through and through. And for LeBron to tell him, I'm leaving, after 4 years, I'm sure that put a strain on their friendship as well. So... LeBron has always been one of those guys that wanted to make sure he had the best possible chance to win, whereas, the players of Michael's era, whether it be Patrick Ewing or Charles Barkley, during the Philadelphia years at least, it was like stand and fight. I'm not going to try to find a better opportunity. Let's see who's going to win. Malone and Stockton in Utah. There wasn't a lot of player movement. Those guys were on those teams, and they were going to battle you. Back in the Boston Celtics Lakers days in the 80s, you wouldn't imagine those guys trying to go somewhere else to try to improve their chances of winning a championship. They were going to get down and fight, and it's just a different era right now. I mean, LeBron's backers will tell you this will be his 10th finals. Michael only went to 6. Of course, he won 6. But I give LeBron...
And MVP in all of them.
I give LeBron credit for getting to 10 finals. That's a remarkable accomplishment.
Well, I mean, he's just an incredible player. All right, before we get to Chuck Swirsky here, just a couple of other notes around the NBA, and both of them that I have written down on my paper here involve the name Beasley. Okay, so we'll start with really a negative up in Minnesota, as Timberwolves guard Malik Beasley was arrested the other day for a litany of things, a possession of a lot of, I don't know, drugs, I guess is the best way of putting it.
Guns.
Also possession of narcotics. I don't understand why these things happen. I mean, these guys make so much money. What are they doing here? Seriously.
You're asking me? I have no idea.
I just asked that, just throwing that out there, because I can never understand.
The one thing that's interesting about that story is that, of course, Malik Beasley played with Denver. So he was a guy who's going to be, I'm not sure if he's restricted or unrestricted free agent, but I thought that might be a guy that the Bulls looked at because of Karnishev's background. Because remember, he averaged like 20 points a game after the trade with Minnesota. And, I think that was more circumstances than overwhelming talent. The old line, somebody's got to score points on a bad team, and he was that guy. But yeah, to have an opportunity, especially going into free agency when he's trying to market himself as somebody that you should invest a lot of money in me because I can be a big part of your future. Well, now teams are going to go, obviously he'll get another opportunity, but it's not going to be what he might have thought.
You think he'll get another opportunity? I mean,
most likely.
After he might go to prison for a while.
Well, yeah, we'll see about it. I mean, I don't know the whole depth of what the charges that are going to be brought against him, but most guys do get a second chance.
All right, well, we'll see. The other Beasley, of course, is Michael Beasley, and he did sign, I guess, the other day with the Brooklyn Nets, but he also, I guess maybe when they did the physical or something like that, he tested positive for COVID-19, so, he'll go on the shelf for a while. Michael Beasley has obviously gone around the NBA, and of course everybody remembers it was either him or Derrick Rose,
right.
One or two. There was actually a poll, and I was working at the Score at the time. Who should we take? Obviously Rose being from Chicago, he won the poll, but there were some people who honestly thought Michael Beasley should be the pick. And Michael Beasley had a very good college career, and he
was outstanding.
Yeah, and he's been, I don't know if I want to use the word journeyman, because even in the NBA he's at times played very well. But I got to recite one story, and I can't even remember what team team he was on at the time, but he came in at the United Center, and, we usually go into the locker rooms, about 45 minutes before tip-off to talk to the visiting players. And here's Michael Beasley coming out of the little trainers area into the locker room, and he's got a hamburger that's the size of, I don't know, like a Brontosaurus burger. And he's, it's got all the toppings, and the juice and everything is just oozing out of it and all over his face as he's eating it 45 minutes before the game. And I almost got nauseous and threw up. How could you pound down this ridiculous giant burger 45 minutes before the game and then run up and down the court? I mean, I wouldn't get anywhere near him if I was guarding him. Seriously.
No, I mean, that's not ideal. I mean, we heard stories of Tony Kukoc having wine with his lunch before he was on game day. I'm sure it wasn't a lot, but that was just one of the things they did in Europe. And players have their different routines, but that's not the kind of routine that you'd like to have. And the infamous story about Beasley showing up to his interview with the Bulls with multiple cell phones and putting them out on the table.
Oh, God.
It's like how to make an impression on your employer. No, that's not the way to do it. Which one of my phones is ringing? Excuse me, I got to get to this.
Which one of my girlfriends is calling me? One of the players once upon a time, because I said to one of them, I go, why do you have 4 or 5 cell phones in your locker? And he goes, come on, what are you, stupid? And I go, yeah, I guess I am. He goes, this one's for her, this one's for that one, blah, blah, blah. I go, okay, what an education right then and there.
Yeah.
All right, speaking of education, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll be educated by the one and only Mr. Chuck Swirsky. We'll be back right after this.
On the debut episode of Pass the Mic, veteran sports writer and broadcaster Peggy Kaczynski talked about having things mansplained to her after she's made an error.
When you make a mistake, it's devastating, and we all feel it. You don't need anyone telling you or pointing out that you were wrong about this. Yes, I get it. The best thing to do is to admit it immediately, post it, say it, and move on from it. Make a joke of it and move on. But when they repeatedly want to try to point out that, well, that's why you don't really know football. I'm like, dude, just because you played high school football in Chicago doesn't mean you know any more than I do, okay? Stop. You stopped at high school, okay? That is not the greatest end all. We could all catch up to anything you learned from then on. And it really ekes me when guys try to do that, and they do it because it makes them feel better. So once you realize that, you have to brush them off. You have to literally brush them off like a little piece of dandruff on your shoulder and just, hey, oh yeah, that was there, sorry, and move on.
Pass the Mic with John Buffone and Alyssa Barbieri, 2 times a month on the Barroom Network.
And welcome back to the podcast. I am David Schuster. He, of course, is Mr. Mark Schanowski. And now we are joined by the voice of the Chicago Bulls. And I had the pleasure of doing some of the stuff with the Bulls broadcast on The Score this past season. And, of course, I'm talking about Chuck Swirsky, who you can follow on Twitter at CTS Bulls. Chuck, appreciate you joining us.
David, Mark, thank you very much.
Chuck, it's great to have you. And, one of the things that I don't think our listeners really know is the time that Chuck puts in preparing for games. He's there in the morning for shoot-arounds. He's got his charts impeccably ready to go, and ready for play-by-play. He's there for practices. This is a guy this is your life, Chuck. And I know that people that follow you on social media, say you're all in Bulls 24/7. And it really is a way of life. I mean, I know some broadcasters probably try to get by just on natural ability and things like that, but you are really a student of the game. What first got that love of basketball in your mind?
Well, Mark, thank you very much for saying those things. This is a passion. This is not a job, and this is something I've wanted to do ever since I was a little boy growing up in Seattle. And, I'm going to date myself, but I would go to sleep with a transistor radio, and I would listen to ball games all across the country. I grew up on the West Coast, and so 50,000 watt signals, Bill King, the legendary voice, and I'm sure David is well aware of him. Mm-hmm. He was the voice of the San Francisco, then Golden State Warriors. He did baseball for the Oakland Athletics. He did football for the Oakland Raiders. And KGO radio in San Francisco would beam up all the way up the coast, Mark, to the Northwest. And I would listen to Warriors games like it was unbelievable. He was a great, great announcer. And I would go to bed with the NBA player register that the Sporting News would publish prior to every season. And I would memorize names, where they went to school, the history of the player. And so my goal, number one goal as a kid, and I'm talking as a little boy, was to be an NBA broadcaster. And the Sonics came in to play as an expansion ball club in 1968. And from that point on, I was immersed into everything about the NBA.
Yeah, I think we have similar stories, and our younger listeners are going, "What's a transistor radio?" but I had the same experience. I grew up in Milwaukee. They came into the league 1967 or 8, I forget now exactly, but I had the same experience. Eddie Doucette was the radio play-by-play man. I used to listen to games in late at night, trying to make sure I was ready for school the next day, but that was just something that was a passion, and I'm sure David has a similar story.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Jim Durham, of course, was somebody who not only did I grow up with a little bit, but then, got a chance to work with him as well. So there's so many great, great voices, Chick Hearn and so many others, Johnny Most, of course, in the NBA, that Chuck is part of an unbelievable fraternity, not only in the past, but also in the present. Hey, Chuck, Mark and I are getting super geeked up and excited about the future, the present, actually, and now the near future for the Chicago Bulls. And obviously, Billy Donovan is now in the fold as the head coach, and Arturas Karnisovas is now in charge. And I just love the partnership already between the two. And I underline that word because it is going to be a partnership, and I think they're on the same page. It's almost like it's kismet between the two.
Well, it's fantastic, David. As you know, you've got to have your coach and the front office on the same page. And it's one thing to talk about it, it's another to do it. And they're going to get it done. There is no question in my mind. I've never met Arturas. I've heard of him. In fact, I heard of him years ago. I've never met the man. I'm anxious to get to know him. I do know Mark Eversley from my days in Toronto. I actually met Mark over 20 years ago. He was with Nike Canada, and he networks extremely well. And when Brian Colangelo replaced Rob Babcock as general manager of the Toronto Raptors, one of the first things he did was to bring in Mark Eversley. And Mark knows a ton of people in the league, shakers and movers. He is a tremendous communicator. He is great with players. And you take Arturas and Mark together with the commitment of ownership, and then they went out and got Billy Donovan. I mean, I think great days are ahead for the Bulls.
Yeah, I thought some of the remarks from Billy in his introductory news conference via Zoom were just right on point in terms of what this young Bulls team needs. He talks about player development, not only developing the individual, but developing them within the system and developing them within the role as to how they play and interact with the other 4 players on the court. I thought he was really good in discussing how he's going to try to go about improving this Bulls team. What struck you most when you listened to Billy in terms of his attitudes towards developing this young talent on the roster?
Well, one thing that really stands out, and David, being around Jim Boylan and Mark as you have done and other coaches, this is not a guy that's going to give you that 20-second soundbite that all of a sudden you hear this and it's going on Twitter within a moment. Billy Donovan actually has a pretty good understanding as far as what to say it, how to frame it, and he is sincere in his message. And I think the narrative is going to be he will break down the X's and O's of a play or a game to the media. He will give you what you need. And as far as the thought process is concerned, I think you're getting a coach who truly understands the makeup of the game. Wherever he has gone, they've won. And they've not only won, but they've gotten better. And the relationship he has with players, to me, is vital. And what Arturas said about, I did my homework, and Billy Donovan said he knows more about me probably than I know about myself. And I'm paraphrasing, but what he essentially is saying is that Arturas did his homework on Billy Donovan, probably even back to his days in the Big East, when Billy was a player in the Rick Pitino at Providence. Of course, Arturas played at Seton Hall. They have a commonality with P.J. Carlissimo, who was the coach at Seton Hall, and a legendary coach at that, taking Seton Hall to the Final Four in '89, losing the national championship game to the University of Michigan. But, having said all these things, I think what you're going to get is Billy Donovan treats people the way they want to be treated. He will treat his players like men.
Hey, Chuck, I think you hit the nail on the head when you described Billy Donovan. Even in one word, he's a winner. He's been a winner everywhere. The 2 national titles, of course, at Florida, 5 years in the NBA, playoffs each and every year. He likely, I don't think this is up for debate. He's the most successful college coach ever to come into the NBA to, win, because there's just a long laundry list of littered coaches that have not succeeded in the NBA who came from the college ranks, and Billy Donovan has succeeded. But the other thing about Billy Donovan that Mark and I both thought of immediately is, besides being a winner and being a really good coach already, he's got cachet around the league. And I think when free agency really hits, not this upcoming season, but the following season, the Bulls will likely have a lot of money available to them. I think players might want to come and play for Billy Donovan. Do you agree with that?
I agree with that. And here, I'm going to ask you guys a question. Let's take the top 75 players in the NBA, the top 75 players in the NBA that have been in the league 6 years or longer, or 5 years and longer. How many of those players do you think were recruited by Billy Donovan to come to Florida?
A lot of them. Yeah, no question.
Florida was a national program, as David mentioned. They won 2 national championships, and if you look at those players, on those NCAA back-to-back winning teams, Joakim Noah, where did he come from? New York. You could go right down the list. Al Horford, Michigan. All these players who played high school ball in different states, and you look at the landscape of the recruiting of Billy Donovan, he went after them all. He didn't. If you think that, he was a regional guy and he recruited in the SEC, no. Billy Donovan, succeeded Lonnie Kruger. And Lonnie Kruger did a fantastic job at Florida. We would all agree with that before he went to the University of Illinois. And, when it's all said and done, truth of the matter is that Billy Donovan was on the highest of highs. He could still be at Florida if he really wanted to. But I think the lure of, when he went to Orlando, changed his mind, went back to Florida, went to Oklahoma City, and, he had a pretty good run for 5 years.
Oh, there's no question about it. And what he did this last year really is impressive after they made the trades, sending Paul George to the Clippers and Russell Westbrook to Houston. A lot of people thought they were going to be a lottery team and Chris Paul would probably be rerouted to another team. Instead, he took that group that he had and turned them into one of the biggest overachieving units this season. So really remarkable. And Chuck, I would love to have been a fly on the wall when Arturas and Billy had their first meeting. Can you imagine the vision that Arturas must have presented to Billy? Because, obviously Billy Donovan had options after all the success he's had at the college and pro level. Arturas had to do some convincing. This guy, Arturas Karnisovas, impresses me so much. He's kind of quiet, kind of understated in his public statements, but he has a vision for this team. And in my view, Chuck, he's thinking big. And we're seeing the commitment from ownership to open up the checkbook, to do whatever it takes to get the right people in place. How excited are you about what this team could become, not only in the long term, but really in the next couple of years?
Well, what's going to be interesting, that's a great question, Mark. What's going to be interesting, Mark and David, is to see how their vision comes out to play and what type of team they want. And, what pieces they have and what pieces they want and what pieces they're going to look at and say, maybe this isn't the right fit. And let's try and move a piece or two. And, while they may have an upside, maybe we can go a different direction. Because really, at this point, it's a blank canvas. We know that the Bulls have some nice young players, but the truth of the matter is we really haven't seen them together on the floor because of injury, and then, of course, the interruption in play. And that's what's going to be probably right now the biggest challenge for the front office is to find out what exactly do they have. We look at Wendell Carter Jr., and Wendell says, I want to play the 4. I'm better suited and more comfortable playing the 4, and he's playing the 5. So what do you do with that? And when you got the fourth pick in the draft, what do you do with the fourth pick? Let's say they elect to stay at 4 because maybe they're going to try and move in the top 3. Maybe they're going to slide back if they can pick up another number 1 or get a veteran player. But let's say they stay at number 4. What do you do with 4? Because I think the first 3 players are probably going to be taken in the draft. Okay, I mean, I think Edwards, Ball, I mean, you can take 1, 2, or 3, Edwards, Ball, Wiseman, whatever. Those 3 players probably will go top 3 in the draft. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say those 3 are gone and the Bulls are at 4. Where do you go with this? Do you go to use a football guy that Dave and I dearly loved, and Mark, you probably knew of him or knew him, was Jim Finks. Jim Finks always told me, regardless, he didn't care if he had 12 offensive linemen. If the best player on the board for the Bears was an offensive lineman, take him and worry about the rest later. So at 4, if there's the best 4 player on the draft, 4th player in the first round, and you've got a surplus, you still got to take him. That's my opinion.
Yeah, because there's going to be trades, Chuck. I mean, you've got a new front office coming in, a new coaching staff, and no matter what we as broadcasters feel about the talent level of certain players, they're going to have a completely different look at it. And I think it's a great idea to have fresh eyes coming in to take a look at these players who Arturis has said repeatedly have underachieved over the last couple of years. And he's going to have his opinions over why that happened. He's going to take a look at these players, break down all the tape. He's already talked to them personally. And I think there's going to be a number of changes. I wouldn't be surprised, Chuck, if the Bulls make a bold move on draft night and maybe package that 4 pick with one of their young guys and try to bring a veteran in who can help right away.
Well, if you're going to do that, Mark, and again, with plenty of options on the table, my take is this. If you are going to package on draft night with the 4th pick, that player that is coming in, if that player is a veteran, that player still needs to have an upside. I mean, we're not talking about a Band-Aid here for a couple of years. You're looking at, if you're going to acquire a player such as that, you're probably going to get a player that still has, what do you think, 5 years, good 5 years remaining in the league?
Yeah, you got to get a guy who's still in his prime, somebody who's in his late 20s.
Yes. So this is the best thing, David and Mark, about what's happened here is because the optics have changed. And this is not a criticism of the previous administration because they did their best, and I still have a great deal of admiration and respect as a man and as a basketball man for Pax. No question about it. I will never throw John Paxson under the bus at all. But now with new optics, they're going to look at these same players maybe differently, maybe the same, maybe tweak it here or there. But I think it's refreshing to see how they're going to put this thing together. And that's what I'm excited for, not only as a broadcaster, but for the fan base, because they needed to re-energize this fan base. And I think the Reinsdorfs have done that.
Hey, Chuck, one of my favorite players, and I think we'll be kindred on this one, both on and off the court, of course, is Joakim Noah. I know what you feel about him as well. Can you see a role for him, if not right away, but certainly down the road, maybe even as an assistant coach to Billy Donovan? Those two are very close. Could you see him coming back to the Bulls organization in some capacity?
Well, you know what, David? The last time I saw him was probably the last time you saw him when he came through at the United Center when we celebrated, Luol Deng. David, to be honest with you, Mark, it depends where he's at in a stage of life. He has 2 young children. He's married. He's got 2 young children. And, whether he wants to get back in it, whether he wants to do the grind of being an assistant coach and looking at tape and working out guys and getting that phone call at 9:30 at night saying, "Hey, coach, can you open up the gym and let's shoot some hoops?" I mean, all those things. I mean, it's a very taxing position as an assistant coach or as a coach, period, in any sport, but especially the NBA. So I think it all depends. I would love to see Joakim Noah one day return to the Bulls organization in whatever capacity, because I love the man, and I do love the man for what he stands for and who he is as a human being. And I just think it depends where he's at that point in his world.
Let me ask you about a current Bull. You mentioned him earlier, Wendell Carter Jr., who was taken with the 7th pick in the draft a few years back. And his development has been slowed by injuries in each of his first 2 NBA seasons. But I'll tell you what, Chuck, when I was watching the Miami Heat game last night and seeing Bam Adebayo put up 32 points, 14 rebounds, and 5 assists, I couldn't stop myself from thinking, I wonder if Wendell Carter Jr. could be something like that. I don't think he's as athletic or as explosive as Bam, but you've watched every game up close that Wendell Carter Jr. has played. What do you think is the upside for this guy? He was playing at about 270 pounds, which I thought was a little bit high. Do you see him maybe with a new coaching staff and being more involved in the offense really taking a big jump in the next year?
Okay, well, that's another great question. I'm going to give you an answer, and this is just my opinion. I think he was the 6th option on the Bulls. In other words, I don't even think he was the 5th option. I don't even think when he got the ball, I think he was at times reluctant to shoot. And there were times when I don't think he had confidence in his game because I'm not sure there was confidence instilled in him. I don't think he was a focal point when there were many times I thought he should have been. And, I mean, I saw him pass up that little 14-footer just inside the foul line in the paint. And I'm thinking to myself, hey, Wendell, you know what? I mean, you take that shot. It's okay. I don't care if you miss 5 straight. If you got that shot, take it. I still think there is an opportunity for him, and I'm hoping he's healthy. But to me, he reminds me a lot of a young Al Horford. And I still think he's going to be a really good player in this league. I like his makeup. I like his tenacity. I just think, and I think Billy Donovan will give him this, I think he needs confidence. And I think he needs somebody who's going to be in his corner to say, listen, I believe in you, and I want you to shoot that ball if you're open. Now, he was taking some corner threes, and you could probably say, okay, maybe this isn't the right time to do this. Let's work on that. But as far as the inside the arc game, I still hold a lot of confidence for him.
Hey, Chuck, I think I can speak for Mark and myself along with you. We're all hoop junkies. There's no question about that. We all love the game to pieces. We're also all hoping that this pandemic is soon in the rearview mirror, whether there's a vaccine or whatever, and we can all get back to the United Center and watch basketball in person. And we greatly, greatly appreciate you joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Chuck. We can't wait to get back to work and calling the game that you love.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Chad Gordon.
And I'm Ryan Lieber. We're the hosts of the Friendly Confines podcast.
Each week we'll bring you the latest Cubs news from the fans' perspective with some of the biggest names in sports.
Joe Buck, welcome to the Friendly Confines with Chad and Ryan.
Yeah, oh my God, I'm happy to do it.
Pat Hughes, welcome to the 7th inning.
Happy to be here, Chad.
It is Len Casper.
You got it, Ryan. Chad, happy to be with you guys.
The Hawk, Andre Dawson.
What is my distinct pleasure. I'm doing fine, thank you.
We're also excited to bring you new episodes as part of the Barroom Network.
So if you're a Cubs fan or even just a baseball fan,
be sure to check out the Friendly Confines podcast every week on the Barroom Network.
And welcome back to the podcast. Nice hearing from Chuck Swirsky. I'm David Schuster. He's Mark Schanowski. Mark, let's talk a little bit about the Bulls right now because Billy Donovan and Arturas Karnisovas, they did have their Zoom call with the media members. We're going to play a few cuts from them. It was really interesting. The thing that I got most out of listening to all the stuff on that Zoom call, these two guys are on the same page, and that's obviously pretty important.
Well, you know, Arturas really had to recruit Billy because Billy had options after taking Oklahoma City to the playoffs 5 years in a row. I'm sure that this was not an opportunity that Donovan was really thinking about when he decided to leave the Thunder, but Arturas must have sold him on his vision and what he sees this team can be in the future, and it's not just the current roster. I'm sure he had to lay out, this is what we're thinking with the draft, this is who we're going after in free agency, and we think you can help us. And it must have been a heck of a plan because he signed. Also, for Arturas to get the Reinsdorfs to give the okay on the contract, which is reportedly 4 years, $24 million. That's quite a financial investment, considering they're still going to have to pay Jim Boylan for a couple of years.
Yeah, now I wanted to highlight that because we were of the belief, and so many others were also, that they were going to go the cheap route, if you will, and sign an assistant coach who was going to grow with Karnisovas, and that assistant coach would probably get like a 3-year deal for like $7.5 million or something along those lines. But Arturas Karnisovas has proven something, certainly to me, and maybe many others also. He is definitely in control. He's got the purse strings. He's got the ear of not only Michael Reinsdorf, but maybe even more importantly, Jerry Reinsdorf. And he's running the show. And if you're a Bulls fan, that's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, and we saw what happened during All-Star Weekend when the Bulls were obviously underrepresented on the court, and a lot of the national commentators taking pot shots at the Bulls organization. Now, this is going to get the attention of agents and prospective free agents down the line that, hey, these guys are trying to win now. They brought in a coach who had a lot of success at Oklahoma City, a guy who can build a system to tailor around his players. I think that it's going to open a lot of eyes around the league, and I think when we get to free agency in the summer of 21, assuming the Bulls have a competitive season, they don't have to make the playoffs next season, but I think they need to win upper 30s to show that they're on the verge of doing something. They could be in the game for some big free agents next year.
That's exactly what you and I both first thought of when we heard that Billy Donovan was going to be the Bulls' next head coach. I mean, yes, he's a really good head coach. He's got success in the NBA, but maybe even more importantly, he's got his finger on the pulse of the rest of the league, and he's going to help when it comes to free agency. And that leads me to the next thing, because the Bleacher Report had a rumor, and again, I'll throw some of these rumors out. Most of them you can discard, but this one is at least interesting to think about. They say that the Bulls might, talk to Oklahoma City. Actually, is Chris Paul a free agent, or is
no? He's not.
Okay.
He's got 2 more years left on his deal at like $44 million.
It's a lot of money. No, I don't know if you can get. It would have to. The only way you could get him in the fold is you got to get rid of Otto Porter Jr.
because
you can't have
$28 million there.
And that's one of the rumors that we'll talk about also. But here's why I think the rumor, at least, maybe not financially, but makes a little sense.
He's going to Milwaukee, Chris Paul.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah.
Okay, the only reason Chris Paul's name would be mentioned in Chicago, obviously, because he played for Billy Donovan, that's number one. And Chris Paul is one of those Pied Pipers in the NBA.
Oh, yeah.
He's got a lot of cachet around the rest of the league as a veteran player. He's also, been, has he been a head of the Players
yes,
Union?
Yeah.
Okay.
President.
So, president of the Players Union. So, that's where it makes some sense if Chris Paul would have come in. I don't see it happening because of the finances more than anything else. But I like the way they're thinking.
With the Otto Porter contract, they could get into that conversation pretty quickly, because then a couple more Felicio you throw in, you're up to $34 million. You could make that deal pretty easily. I just think that Chris Paul, the clock is ticking. He's not getting any younger. He played remarkably well for the Thunder this past season. But I don't think he's going to want to go to a situation like Chicago that's 2, 3, 4 years away. He's in Milwaukee. If he goes there, teams up with Giannis, they could win it next year, and I think that's what he's looking for.
All right, let's hear from Billy Donovan right now, because one of the reasons, that the Bulls management said they were looking for a certain kind of coach was player development. It's not the first thing that I think of when I think of Billy Donovan, but apparently he's done very well in that category as well, as he told the reporters the other day.
I do think a large part of player development is a player developing confidence in his role and a confidence of what he needs to do to help the team. And sometimes you can have a situation where a player wants a different role, or a player wants to do more, or sometimes less is more. And, trying to strike that balance where they understand that, hey, this is the job, this is what you got to do to help the team. And then I think the other part of it is, film, watching that, and then listening to the player talk about, hey, here's when I feel like I'm at my best. These are the things I think I can do really, really well. And you know what? They may not be able to do all those things, for the team. And it was interesting. I had Chris Paul and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Dennis Schroeder. They're all starting point guards. I thought a big advantage for our team would have been to play all 3 of those guys together. But it would have never worked had it not been for their level of unselfishness, right? Because somebody had to play off the ball. Somebody wasn't going to be the point guard. Someone wasn't going to initiate offense. And they're all used to having the ball in their hands, but they understood the bigger picture that if they could function well together as 3 point guards, that would be a huge advantage for our team. But it required them all giving up something, And I think that's what you got to do in terms of trying to strike that balance.
All right, let's just play along with this just a little bit. Let's just say Chris Paul came here. And the Bulls were able to, first of all, Otto Porter going to Oklahoma City, he's only got 1 year left on his contract. So who knows? Maybe that's actually appealing to them. It's one less year of paying a lot of money. I don't know. And Felicio and all that kind of stuff. Chris Paul, Chris Dunn, and Kobe White. Could you see those three on the court at one time? Because actually, I don't think I can.
No, I don't think that's something that they would want to do. I don't think Chris Dunn's going to be here for one, and he's not a shooter. So if you're going to put Chris Paul with the ball in his hands, you're going to have shooters alongside him. I think it's going to be fascinating this offseason to see which teams are really going to go for it. There's going to be a new force in the East next year with the Brooklyn Nets, with Kevin Durant coming back, with Kyrie Irving. It'll be interesting to see what Milwaukee does. Will Giannis get traded if he turns down the max contract extension? There could be a real reset in the NBA. The Clippers, are they going to panic now? Are they going to try to split up Kawhi and Paul George? It's going to be fascinating to see which teams are really going to try to make a bold move because, as you mentioned with LeBron, this is probably his best chance to get another championship. AD will re-sign with the Lakers. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But are the Lakers a prohibitive favorite? Golden State's going to be back with Steph and Clay. It's going to be fascinating to see how the power shakes out next season.
Do you think Anthony Davis signs a long-term deal or a short-term deal to keep his free agency options open even further down the road when, let's say, LeBron is done?
I think he would be wise to sign one of those one-and-one contracts where that way not only can he hedge against a potential injury or maybe LeBron suddenly losing effectiveness, which I don't think was going to happen, but yeah, he could protect himself that way, sign a one-year deal with a player option for the second year, and because the salary cap may go down either this year or next year, that way he can get a bigger chunk of the pie and get a bigger contract in 2 years from now. All
right, let's hear one more from Billy Donovan. And, the name Joakim Noah came up constantly, not only before the press conference, but during the press conference with Billy Donovan. Joakim Noah, I think he's a free agent, is he not, going forward?
I guess he has an option that the Clippers can pick up.
Okay, my guess is that he's going to go somewhere else. It could even come here to Chicago, and you and I have talked about this previously. I could see him being a part-time role player here in Chicago and ultimately being on Billy Donovan's coaching staff.
I think that would be the more likely possibility if he came to Chicago. It would be as an assistant coach rather than as a player because the Bulls right now, like it or lump it, they got 4 centers on the roster.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's hear from Billy Donovan talking about Joakim Noah.
He had incredible things to say about the organization. He obviously spent the majority of his career in Chicago, loved every minute of it. He's actually talked about possibly coming back and doing charity work for the Bulls. He's a great guy. He's a great competitor. He's got an unbelievable heart and a caring guy. And I think just besides coming to Chicago now with the Bulls, I heard him speak so favorably about the organization and the city, why he was here. And he loves the Bulls and loves Chicago. So probably earlier on, when he first got drafted by Chicago, I knew pretty early on while I was still in college of what a special place Chicago, is and was, not only from a Bulls organizational standpoint, but just from a city and what it meant to him to play for the Bulls.
Joakim Noah loved Chicago, but the Chicago media loved him just as much, if not more, because, boy, it was so much fun talking to him. He's a little moody, I'll be honest with you, but when he was in a good mood, boy, he gave us some great stuff.
Yeah, Joakim was fantastic. You mentioned a love affair with the fans, not only for his play on the court, but some of the things that he said about the Chicago, the heart and soul. You remember the when he had those comments about the homeless in the Chicago area, the people that he passes on the way in the United Center. He struck a chord with the fan base, and people would love to see Joakim Noah back in any capacity. In a way, to me, I think it'd be kind of sad to see him come back as a player in terms of just being, a guy that's in a suit most nights and is the third or fourth center. Because I felt for him with the Clippers, because at the end of the run, he wasn't even on their active roster. Father Time is undefeated, and he played so hard during his Bulls years, just took an enormous toll on his body. And of course, he had that accident where he hurt his Achilles, and that's an awful injury for an athlete. Yes, he could be on the team, but I think if they could find a more unique role for him, something that would suit his talents, I think that would probably be a better fit.
He will come back to Chicago, I think, in some capacity at some point. And the one moment, and there's so many great moments with him, the one moment that stood out was that series against the Celtics, that incredible series against the Celtics, when he stole the ball and he went the length of the court and he jammed it, and then the primal scream that came out of him. I mean, you could hear that in the second balcony at the United Center. That was just a moment never to forget. All right, one more soundbite if we can. This is from Arturas Karnisovas. And as I mentioned, he and Billy Donovan seem to be on the same wavelength. He says, yeah, it was kismet right away with the two.
When we sit down and we talked about the roster, I thought that, this roster is too talented to what they showed the last 2 years. That they had a lot of potential, and we kind of agreed. There's a good mix of young players and vets. And, we have a lot of, from picks to cap space in the future, to build this team. So on both sides, I think there was a lot of optimism looking at the roster, and we spent a lot of time talking to Billy and about offense, about defense, about the way he values relationships and how he rallies players around him, and how he values relationship with players and gets a buy-in from them. So it just from those conversations, we were definitely on the same page and have the same mentality. So that was it was easy decision, to land on Billy.
Karnisovas and Donovan, I got a feeling this is going to be a pretty successful partnership for years to come.
And the nice thing is that they've talked about the fact that they're going to work together in terms of the draft and free agency. It won't be a situation where the front office is picking players without really getting a lot of input from the coaching staff. And I know that every organization does it differently. Some have the coaches involved in the scouting of college prospects and taking a look at workouts. Others just kind of let the front office do it and say, Coach, here's your players. Let's see what you can do with them. I think that they're going to work together and trying to identify who are the best players that are going to fit with each other. I thought one of the intriguing things that Billy said was that when you talk about trying player development, it's not just developing a player in a vacuum. It's how do you develop him in relation to your system and the other four players on the court. I thought that was fascinating, the fact that you want to be a star in your role. And one of the biggest things for a coach is to get the buy-in from the player that, yes, this is my role. I'm going to accept that and I'm going to excel at it. Not everybody can be the leading scorer on the team or get the most shot attempts or be the guy with the ball in his hands all the time. You have to get the players to buy in to say, you can be a star in your role, and by doing that, you can help us succeed. And I think that is his philosophy going in. Some of the young guys, I'm sure along the way, have gotten into some bad habits because you're on a team that loses all the time. With Zach, it was always, how many points can I score? Can I make the all-star team? Can I get some individual recognition? I'm sure Billy's going to get him in a face-to-face conversation and say, you're a prolific scorer, and we love everything about that, but this is what you need to do for us to win games. And if Zach is sincere about all the good things in basketball come through winning, he'll make those changes. If not, he'll probably be moved along to another team.
It's interesting that you mentioned in that the statements there, the draft and Zach, because those are the last 2 points I want to bring up here. Zach, by the way, Zach Levine, will be playing in his 7th year in the NBA upcoming for his 6th coach.
That's not good.
That blows me away just to even hear it. I mean, I knew about it, but 6 coaches in 7 years? Wow.
And he's never had a winning season. Never experienced that in the NBA. So he is like this raw lump of clay, and I think that Billy wants to mold him into a winning player because the physical gifts are off the charts. I'm a big Zach Levine fan. I know you are as well. Yeah. I think that this is a guy that can be a really important piece on a team that can try to accomplish some lofty things. I know some Bulls fans think that he should be moved along. I think this is a guy that you want to keep on your roster because he really cares. I mean, he's a hard worker. He really cares about what's going on out there, and I think sometimes he's a victim of circumstances in that he's been with some bad teams that really didn't have much of a chance of accomplishing much. I think that with a new coaching staff, with a new front office, we're going to see even a more rededicated Zach Levine. I'm really fascinated to see what he's going to be able to accomplish next season. season.
And he has improved in areas that he needed to improve on. And some credit to Jim Boylan, who said, I want you to become more of a two-way kind of player. And he did, to his own credit, and maybe Jim Boylan's as well. All right, the last point, and you mentioned the draft earlier as well. I've been seeing a lot of stuff about the draft combine, and what I saw, and correct me if I'm wrong, Anthony Edwards, James Wiseman, Obi Toppin, they're not going to be part of participation. But I did see that LaMelo Ball will participate in the draft combine.
Yeah, there have been mixed reports on that. Initially, it was said that he was going to be there for workouts, but now he may just go get measured, get the medicals done.
That's what the top players do.
Do the virtual interviews. It's still going to be virtual. It's not like players are going to be sitting down with the front office representatives for face-to-face conversations over a meal or whatever. It's still going to be limited. I don't think that the executives are going to get a whole lot out of it, unless, of course, that maybe some player that they had some questions about what kind of shape is he in, and they get to see him on the court, and maybe somebody will turn their heads, especially you think of in that vein about big guys, you worry about their weight and things like that. So they want to get a look at if these guys have stayed in shape over the last 5 or 6 months, and that could be important. But I think most of the prep work has already been done. I mean, Arturis has talked about the fact they've done dozens of interviews with draft prospects via Zoom conferences, and until they can get to a same room and talk to him face to face, I don't know that this is going to change a whole lot of evaluations.
Let's get that vaccine. Let's get this pandemic in the rearview mirror. Let's get basketball in person back for both of us and everybody else. Mark, as always, has been fun.
Yeah, I can't wait. Finals start on Wednesday, and we'll see.
Lakers in 5. What do you say?
See if Jimmy's got any more magic. I'm going to go Lakers in 6 as a testament to Jimmy being able to get a couple.
I would love to be wrong about even the team that I picked. I mean, LeBron's fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but if Miami can pull the upset, then people will just once again say, "Hey, he's not Michael Jordan talking about LeBron."
And you know that LeBron is going to get the calls, and I worry that Bam Adebayo gets in foul trouble, and then you're going to Kelly Olynyk and Myers Leonard, and then things start to. If Miami can keep their best players on the court, if Bam can stay out of foul trouble, if Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero can get hot from three-point range, it could be a really fun series. If not, it could be a cakewalk.
You don't think the pride of Champaign, Myers Leonard, can't take over this series?
No, I don't think that's a very likely possibility.
And that one we agree on, and then that one we will end this podcast, and we will look forward to talking to you next week. Take care, everybody.